Hello, everyone, and welcome again to my podcast, Grit Stories of Resilience. I am really happy today to have as my guest a, a young man that I have known for a long time, Richard Dick McNeil. I call him Dick because, as he says just today, if I call him Richard, that would mean I was a telemarketer, and only people who don't know him call him Richard, which I can relate to that. Dick is one of those people who uh, has an interesting life and career, and he's going to talk about it here today. He was born in Syracuse, New York, I believe. Uh,
That's correct.
after high school in the 1960s, he joins the United States Marine Corps. Is in there for 4 years, honorably discharged, and gets out. He then goes to school, to college and law school. I think law school at Syracuse. Graduates with honors, and then, lo and behold, he rejoins the Marine Corps, where he becomes a defense counsel, trying cases, stationed in North Carolina, Okinawa, places like that. He knows Vietnam, and now he lives down in the Jacksonville, North Carolina area, where he has a private law firm. And what he does is he represents people in the military courts, but also a fascinating practice of representing people charged with capital murder. At any given time, he has got a number of clients getting ready to stand trial for murder. We're going to talk to him about all these cases, why he takes them, how he does what he does, and what is the concept of winning to him and how he does it. Dick, it's good to see you again this afternoon. Thanks for doing this with me. I appreciate it very much.
Good seeing you, Jim. It's a pleasure.
Thanks so much. Dick, how did you come to join the Marine Corps in the 1960s, immediately after graduating from high school?
While I was in the process of graduating from high school, like kind of regular as a regular student, and I guess I just didn't. I had been accepted into college, but I guess I just didn't feel like I was ready. I'm not sure why, but within a month of graduation, I went down to the Marine recruiter, and within about a month, I was at Parris Island boot camp. I had watched the movie, which most people that watch this or listen to this will not ever remember, but it's called The DI with Jack Webb. And I guess I was fascinated by that TV show, that movie. So, within a month of graduating from high school, I went to Parris Island and was down at boot camp for the Marine Corps.
What did you do in the 4 years you were in the Marine Corps at first?
As an enlisted man, I was mostly in the fields of administration. Like I used to kid when I was in Vietnam that I was a Remington Raider. Okay, like the typewriter. I don't think they use those typewriters anymore. But I was in Camp Lejeune. Then I went to Camp Smith, Hawaii, which was the headquarters of the FMF commanding general. Had a top secret clearance. I worked in the command center. So for about 2 years in Hawaii, I was in touch with, kind of everything that was going on in Vietnam. I was just a sergeant, but I had that security clearance and worked in the command center on shift work. So I did that for about almost 20 months. Then this sounds, again, looking back, I volunteered to go to Vietnam. I was in Hawaii, which is a pretty wonderful place to be, had a good job. But I volunteered to go to Vietnam, and about 2 months later, they agreed to send me to Vietnam. So in the fall of 68, or I should say in August of 68, I was sent to Vietnam. And when I was in Vietnam, again, I was in administration. I worked near Da Nang, Vietnam, as part of the 3rd Military Police Battalion. But I was in administration. So
How long were you? Yeah, how long were you there?
10 months and 26 days.
It's
I remember.
you remember exactly how long you
Yeah.
were there.
We used to always keep little stats on how many days we had left on our tour. My
Dick,
tour would have been 13 months, but my contract was up. So I only got to spend the 10 months and 26 days.
Dick, I look at you and I think of that movie, Good Morning Vietnam. You
Yes.
know
Yeah.
that you could have been a character in that movie for
Yeah,
sure.
probably could have been. Yeah, I remember that well. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, and after you get out of the Marines, after you get out of Vietnam, you go to school, go to college, and then to Syracuse to law school,
Correct.
graduate with honors, and then you sign up again for the Marines. Is that right?
Absolutely. And when I left the Marine Corps in the summer of 1969, I had enjoyed my Marine Corps 4 years, but I never thought I'd go back in. Not because it was negative, but I went to college, went to law school, and then as a second year law student, a friend of mine was joining the Marine Corps, and I said, "Well, let me look into the law program in the Marine Corps." And I always wanted to be a trial lawyer. I used to watch Perry Mason when I was a kid, and the Marine Corps is a great place to be a trial lawyer. So I looked into it and I signed up. And after my second year law school, I went to Quantico, Virginia for 10 weeks and got commissioned as a Marine Corps officer. Came back, finished my last year at Syracuse Law School. And then upon graduation from Syracuse Law School, I went in the Marine Corps as a JAG, a Judge Advocate General. So I didn't think that I would ever do that, but I really like the thought of doing trial work, and the Marine Corps has a lot of that.
How many trials would you say in your career you've been involved in? You got any idea or any guess?
I would say in the Marine Corps, I've had hundreds and hundreds. In my Marine Corps service, I did that for about 47 years. I was a prosecutor, a defense counsel, a military judge, an appellate lawyer. So I would say, hundreds, probably three or four hundreds at least. In fact, probably more than that. I did 360 cases as a military judge. So probably close to 1,000 counting the different jobs. So,
Now that you're in private practice and out of the Marines, what led you to a criminal law defense practice that you do? Do
well,
you
when
like it?
I retired as a Marine Corps lawyer, and I got to the rank of major. So, 1992, I retired from the Marine Corps as a major. I'd done 20 years. I still loved criminal law. Okay, at that point when I retired, I was an appellate lawyer. I was a defense appellate lawyer in Washington, D.C. So I retired on a Friday, and Monday in Jacksonville, North Carolina, I opened up my office. It was just me and a couple of desks. Okay, and as a result of that, I just started representing military folks at court martials and administrative hearings and the like. So based on my experience when I was in the military, it seemed like a natural transition. And I could have been, obviously I could have gone become a prosecutor. I have a twin brother who was also in the Marine Corps. He became a federal prosecutor in the Department of Justice. So he went the prosecution route. I guess my personality was more of a defense oriented person. So my hope and goal was to represent military folks. So that's what I
Yes,
did.
yeah. Yes, you see, you just raised a point I hadn't thought about. You were talking about your twin brother went the prosecutor route. You went the defense attorney route, and that it suited your personality more. What is it about your personality that drove you or led you to be a criminal defense attorney as opposed to, say, a prosecutor?
I think it's hard to define exactly, but I think, kind of like always been in favor of the underdog. Obviously, I believed in the concept of everybody has a right to a fair trial, and everybody has a right to representation. So I just wanted to represent people. It's not, you're not as successful with it. People ask me my batting average. It's not probably that good, but most defense counsel's batting average is not good. But so I think it was just a combination of when I was in the Marine Corps, I was a defense counsel and just enjoyed that side of it. Like, if, for example, as an appellate lawyer, okay, when you're an appellate defense lawyer, you have to come up and write the brief, and you have to come up with ideas and legal concepts to file in that brief. The appellate government counsel, he just responds. So there's a lot more imagination. I think it's harder to be a defense counsel than a prosecutor. Nothing against you personally, but so I guess I like the challenge of that. I mean, you got to be, and you have to have the right personality. You're not going to win most of the time, by
I
far.
agree with you. I've long believed uh, that I think being a defense attorney is a more challenging role
Correct.
than
Yeah.
being a prosecutor. Prosecutor sort of puts on the show to start off with, and he or she knows what the deal is. It's all laid out for him or her with agents and investigations and that sort of stuff. And your witnesses are right there, and you don't have a individual client. You have the state or the government or something like that, or the military as the client. But a defense lawyer has to be creative, I think, to be successful. Either
Yes,
in
indeed. Um, yes, yes, indeed. You have to be. It's very challenging, and again, you have to be hopefully pragmatic and do the right thing for your client. Uh,
what kind of cases do you primarily deal with now? I know you've talked in programs about the murder type cases that you do. Is that pretty much it right now?
right now, I've stopped doing military cases about a year ago. I figured about 46 years of doing that was enough. Um, and then right now I just do murder cases where I'm assigned by the North Carolina Capitol Defender. So currently I have 13 homicides and 8 of those are death cases. Right now it's just basically these murder cases that I get assigned to.
So you don't really select your client. Your client is sort of selected for you.
Yes
Is
and
that
no.
right?
One of the reasons about 2001 I chose to do the capital litigation is the North Carolina came up with a really good system. They basically every murder case is assigned to the capital defender, and that person and his staff assign different individuals to those cases. So when I'm called by the capital defender's office, I can say yes or no to a particular case.
Okay. Okay.
Um, and also, they have some really good rules. I think the system in North Carolina is really pretty fair in terms of support from the Capitol Defender's Office. So as a result of that, I said that sounds like a really fair system. Like for example, this sounds minor, but it's huge. In the military, if you want an expert witness as a defense lawyer, you have to get in front of the judge, and it's almost beg to get that expert. Okay, and in the state, if I need an expert, I have to send some paperwork to the Capitol Defender and I have to justify it. But I don't have to get in front of a judge for a hearing and start pinching pennies like sometimes the military does. So that's a huge benefit, is that the state is very much aware of what we need in those kind of cases, and they're a lot more pragmatic. So I just switched over pretty much because I thought that's pretty fair. Like, from the get-go, you're getting the resources you need to represent people charged with homicide and occasionally the death penalty.
So these are state, not federal cases that you're
These
involved
are all
in
state.
murder. Which jurisdictions are you in primarily? I mean, which locations?
I think in terms of doing these, I've done about 100 murder cases altogether in my life. I, I think I've done about 15 to 16 different counties. I haven't hit the west part of the state. So basically, a lot of counties east of 95. I think the latest count is like 15 different counties I've had homicide cases in. So usually within, like I go from Jacksonville to Lumberton. That's like about
Right,
120
right.
miles.
Okay,
So
okay.
there's kind of a range about that around 100 miles, 120 miles that I can take a case.
I think I know the answer to this question, but these are tough cases. They're hard cases, aren't they?
Yes, yes. I mean, you're talking about the, potentially the worst punishment possible.
How do you deal with that on a regular basis? I mean, if you, in a total work week, what drives you? What keeps you going to represent people who are in deep trouble, even though they're charged with grave offenses, they may or they may not be guilty of the exact charge for which they have. How do you see your role in this?
A friend of mine once sent me a little picture of myself and a little slogan underneath. And God bless the young major. She was a Marine major, and she was a lawyer. And she said, McNeill is concerned about the client getting a fair trial. And I think that that's generally what I'm going for. Like, many people ask me, and I'm sure they've mentioned that to you in many conversations throughout your life. Like, how do you represent somebody that's guilty? Well, the answer to that, I think if most people get the answer, I think they understand. It's, you want to make sure it gets a fair trial. You want to make sure that the state or the military government has done its job, met its burden. And then you try to, obviously get the best result you can. So it's really kind of making sure the process is fair. We've all heard about sometimes you'll hear about a case where the guy was innocent and he spent 25 years in prison, and that doesn't happen often. I'm not certainly going to fabricate that, but it does happen. So I think it's just making sure the process works. And I'm good at it. Sometimes the client will ask me, why do you do this work? And I say, because I'm good at it. Okay. And secondly, you have to have the right personality. I mean, you have to, and I think I thank the Marine Corps. When you're in the Marine Corps and you're in Viet Nam, and I was not a hero in Vietnam, but I was in Vietnam. I've had a lot of tough training in my career. And, when they tell you to go on a 20-mile hike, you just get up there and do it. I mean, there's no turning back. And so I think the Marine Corps was a huge part of that, in terms of, I can handle the pressure. I'll do my job, and it's not going to wear me down in the sense of whether it's politics or personalities and stuff. So I just put, like when you're doing a march and you get sore feet, and you're on the last mile of the hike, you can't say, Corpsman, I need a ride. Okay. You keep marching. So you keep putting one foot in front of you. You've had some hard knocks in your life. You got to keep going. So I think that's just part of the personality. And I think the Marine Corps had a lot to do with it.
What would you say is your most happy result in a criminal murder case that you've handled? What are you most proud of, the result that you have gotten in the past, would you
I
say?
think in the military, I had quite a few of them. And again, the military system is so much different from the state system. I think in the state system, I had a murder case in 2006 through 2008. And this man was charged with a very bad crime in Pamlico County, Beaufort. And he was charged with killing two elderly people in a brutal manner. They were successful yacht builders, well known in the community, and he was charged with killing them. And we went to trial 3 times. I kiddingly tell people it took me the 3rd time to get it right. Okay. But it started out a capital case. I got a hung jury. We did trial number 2. I got a hung jury again. We did trial number 3, and he was acquitted. And that was 2006, 2007, and 2008. And it seemed like every August, September of those years, I was going to court up there in Pamlico and Craven County. And that was probably my biggest victory. He was finally acquitted on the 3rd time.
That's a rare thing to happen.
Yes. Yes. In fact, the judge on the case said that was the only time that he'd ever had a first-degree murder acquitted, as long as he was the judge.
What do you do to celebrate's not the right word, but what do you do after winning a case like that? How does it make you feel?
It was kind of surreal. When the jury came back and found him not guilty, the judge said to him, which I'll never forget, he said, "Mr. Jones, you're free to go." And he had been in jail for 5 years and 9 months. And we walked out of the building together, and even thinking about it now, it gives me chills. I mean, that was an amazing moment.
Was that a circumstantial evidence case? Was the state's case weak?
It was a combination. I think they settled in him being the defendant. They had some mostly circumstantial evidence, but I think they kind of jumped the gun a little. He had a prior record of using drugs. He worked for these people. And I thought, getting to know him over all that period of time, I really believed that he had not done it. And he always, and again, you learn things over your career as you have. If I was totally innocent of a crime, I'd be telling my lawyer that quite often, okay, if not every day. He was like that. A lot of my clients don't tell me that every day, and that so I kind of believed in the guy, and we got a couple of hung juries, and each time the state did it, I got some little more cracks here and there. So it was a combination. So it was kind of some direct stuff because he was in the area. He lied to the police about where he was that night. He was using cocaine. So they thought because he lied about using cocaine that he had committed the homicide. So it was a combination of both, probably.
What's the hardest thing that you have found in representing people charged with a capital case? What's the most difficult part of that experience?
Without a doubt, getting them to, and again, this is over a period of time. Like, it's very important that any defense lawyer spend time with their clients. In order for them to trust you, they got to believe that you care about them. That sounds so simplistic, but some lawyers don't do a very good job of that. So I think the hardest thing, and it's harder now than it was 15 years ago.
That's that.
Clients today, the younger clients under 30 today are a different generation than maybe 15 years ago. And this is a societal question, they're more enabled. They have this belief that they're smarter than us, which is so I'd say the hardest part is getting them over a period of time to trust my judgment and in terms of my evaluation. I had a client recently. I asked him, and I don't do this normally, but I did it in this case. I said, client, what do you think my role is? And he said, get me off. And I said, that's not my role. My role is to evaluate the evidence and my legal judgment and come up with the best possibility in your case. It's kind of like a doctor. Doctor gets all the tests. He comes up with a result. If you have cancer, he hates to tell you that, but he's got to tell you that you got cancer. Well, so it is not to get you off. It's to give you a fair, honest, smart, hopefully over years and decades of experience, thought on your case. A lot of clients think I hear this often, they don't have a lot of evidence on me. Well, I kind of disagree, son. So I'd say that right now, that's the hardest part. It's harder now than it was 15 years ago. And I think if you talked about generational stuff, you could see that, whether it's schools nowadays and just society in general.
Do people that you represent charged with, say, murder or something like that, do they tell you that they are committed the crime, or do they tend to always say, I did not commit the crime? Does anybody ever tell you, I did it?
Most of the time, they do not. One of my favorite clients was a client who came in the first time I met him. He said, McNeill, get me a number. And that meant, obviously, he would plead to like second degree. As you know, first degree murder is automatically life without parole. Second degree is generally, 20 or 25 years, depending upon your record, but it's a number. So he said that to me right away. Get me a number. He was the unusual client, and I did get him a number. So most of the time they're delusional. Okay. There was a basketball coach from UCLA a couple months ago, got mad at his team. They didn't play well. And he came out and said to the press, my players, I think I work harder than my players. And he was pretty down on his team, which is kind of unusual. But he said something at the end that I think applies to society in general and some people. He said, my players are delusional. Well, sometimes my clients are delusional in the sense of what they hope and expect. Like, I'll take 7 or 8 years. you can't get a plea for 7 or 8 years, no matter how good you are as a lawyer for the majority of these cases. So, so the hardest part is, I guess, trying to get them to trust me over a period of time and recommend something that they might be willing to do. That's the hardest part by far. See, the Marine clients were totally the opposite of that. Again, a lot of that's society. Military clients, they join the military, they do good work in the military, and then they get in some generally minor trouble, not major trouble. And I never had a military client ever try to fire me. I never had a military client really lie to me. It's a lot different when you're talking about some of the state people.
You find that your clients lie to you often when you first see them?
I assume they lie. Literally, when I get a client, I assume they're going to lie. So I don't, and again, different lawyers have different aspects. When I first meet them for the first time, I don't usually ask them, are they guilty or not? I kind of introduce myself and explain the process, et cetera. But I would say, for the most part, I kind of anticipate they will lie, which is 180 degrees different from my military clients who would not lie.
How long, if ever, does it take you to break a person down to get that person to tell you the truth?
I think it's, somewhere in, 6 to 9 months. I try to visit my clients quite often and get that trust factor. And typically they don't trust us, which again, you kind of understand. They also make comments about that I'm a public defender. And I tell them that nothing against public defenders, but I'm a privately assigned counsel. I don't work for the state of North Carolina. They pay me, but they have no control over Dick McNeil. And that usually makes them feel better. But, there's that suspicion, kind of the conspiracy thing going on. So you have to kind of get by that. But the number one complaint about lawyers is they don't come to see me. So I try to make sure that they can complain about what I'm telling them. Don't kill the messenger, but they can't complain that I don't see them. So that's why communication and trust is so vital.
So, have you ever tried a murder case and you thought that your client, if not innocent, was certainly not guilty of the level of murder charge that he was facing? And have you ever done that and been disappointed in the result?
Yes, I've had maybe a handful or so that bother me to this day, when my client had committed the crime, but it was not first degree, it was maybe second degree. So I've had a number of those that were really, and to today, they're still kind of troubling, because again, premeditation is first degree, which means life without parole. Second degree is usually 20, 25 years. So there's a huge difference. So I've definitely had a few that I thought should not have been premeditation under the facts. So
Are
those
any of
are,
these, are any of these cases you have now or have had in the past, have any of them been death cases?
I've had about 15 or 20 death cases that started out death, but I've only had one that in 2005, it went to trial. He would not plead guilty. And he did get the death penalty, but that was an unusual case because when it came to sentencing, he refused his lawyers, me and my other lawyer. We could not present any evidence. He told us to shut up, like sit down, and we're not presenting anything to the jury in terms of the sentencing aspect of that capital case. So we sat there like potted plants, didn't argue, didn't present anything, and he did get the death penalty. I've been lucky with all the other ones. I had the one acquittal I already told you about. Most of the time, I've been able to get a plea to life. That's a big sell. That's where it really needs some trust, and they have to believe in you, and obviously the facts. So, interestingly enough, in a lot of capital cases, a couple of years ago, I think the Capital Defender's Office did a survey or something. It was about 4 or 5 years ago. And they found that 46% of the capital cases in North Carolina ended in second degree or less. That was stunning.
Really?
Yes. I'd like to give a podcast to the people in North Carolina to realize how much sometimes their money is being wasted, okay, on a capital
Tell me
case.
about that right now. What do you think? Why do you think it's being wasted?
The system in North Carolina needs reform, and that's not coming from, flaming liberal. In North Carolina, each individual district attorney, the elected district attorney, makes a choice, a little on somewhat based on the law, but also his own individual choice to make a case capital or not. It's solely the district attorney's decision. Attorney General has nothing to do with it. It's just that individual. So I've had a number. In fact, right now I have 8 capital cases, and I think 4 of them. And I say this again, not being a crazy liberal, is just being pragmatic. 4 of them should not be capital. You're supposed to make the worst of the worst is supposed to be a death case. And prosecutors in different counties are sometimes using that with the hope that it's leverage. And that's unfair, and it's not a very good system. And so much as money has wasted. I had a case in Wayne County 3.5 years ago. It was declared capital. Unfortunately, one of the lawyers passed away. I got involved later in the process. We went 3 years. 2 individuals were charged with capital murder. And then a couple months ago, the prosecutor, because of a conflict in his schedule, made them non-capital. Well, ladies and gentlemen of the state of North Carolina, he wasted tens of thousands of dollars by doing that.
By making it a capital case.
Yes. And it should never have been a capital case in the first place. And I swear that if I told 100 people, they would agree with me. But it lasted for 3 years, and because you get 2 lawyers in a capital case, you almost always get a psychologist and a psychiatrist. You get a mitigation person, so it takes longer. More people are involved, so that's why it's very disturbing to me that in North Carolina that they have that system. Quickly, in a federal system, you have to go to the Attorney General. If you're a U.S. attorney and you want a case in your district that goes capital, you have to go to the Attorney General of the United States and have a hearing in front of a committee up there on the issue of whether it's a death case or not. Defense is there, prosecution is there. So they get a great idea of what they think is the worst of the worst, if you know what I mean. North Carolina should adopt that same thing.
So what you're saying is that the individual elected district attorney in North Carolina for the district in which he is or she is serving gets to decide whether the case is going to be a capital or a non-capital case. If it is a capital case, it requires 2 defense lawyers and other expert people. It simply costs more money.
Costs more money, takes a lot longer. Yes, absolutely. Yes.
And these people generally do not wind up getting the death penalty, or if they do, nothing ever happens. Very little happens in North Carolina.
Last year, the Capital Defender's Office had 3 capital cases that went to trial, and all 3 got a unanimous life verdict. So, and I don't know the details of those 3. Maybe some of them were legitimate in terms of requesting or trying to get the death penalty, but I'm saying that it's a total waste of time and money. Also, a capital case takes anywhere from 4 to 8 weeks, maybe, to try. A regular non-capital homicide case takes 7-8 days. You have to pick a jury in a capital case. Jury selection takes weeks. A normal selection of a jury trial in a regular murder case takes maybe 1.5, 2 days max to pick a jury. I mean, it's phenomenal. And when I tell people that, or occasionally they may or may not still believe in the death penalty. That's a different concept, but I think they would recognize that it's not fair. So that's my view.
Yeah. Let me ask you this: what are your views on the death penalty?
I should probably take the 5th Amendment. Okay.
Okay. That's all right. You don't have to answer that.
No, no, I'll back down to Justice Blackmun, who said like 20 years ago in a denial of cert. Justice Blackmun wrote the greatest couple of pages. He said, "I will no longer tinker with the machinery of death. It's too arbitrary and capricious." That's my concern about it. That it is, and now granted, we have come a long way. The lawyering is better. We get better training, so those number of cases have diminished in terms of people actually getting the death penalty. But I think it is arbitrary and capricious. And that's what I'm saying about North Carolina, that there should be similar to the federal model where have a more neutral group of people. You could have a defense lawyer on there. You could have a former judge. You could have a bunch of people on there and let them decide whether that's worthy of getting a death case and causing the financial concern. So that's my biggest concern. Is it's very arbitrary. You could commit the same crime, same facts in two adjoining counties and have a different decision whether it's capital or non-capital. That doesn't sound fair to me.
It's not. It's not equal.
It's not. Yeah, absolutely. It's not. That's a great point. It's not equal.
It's not equal. No. It depends on where you were being tried, and what county you committed the crime in.
Yep. Absolutely.
That. I agree with that. I agree with that. So right now, what are your hopes for the cases that you've got pending? Do you have any hopes for? Or I know you may not be able to talk about certain cases in the detail, but as best you can, how do you see the next year or so of your career in life?
I'm going to be busy. I currently, it seems that I have a number of clients that don't want to accept responsibility, and they may, in fact, have to go to trial. So, that's, I would say out of the cases I have, I probably have 8 or 9 that may actually go to trial. And that's not generally a good thing for my clients.
Do you do you see in your role when you have a client that goes to trial, that is either because you think he is not guilty of what they're trying to charge him with and won't take a plea or a deal, or the client, his or herself, simply doesn't accept reality?
They don't accept reality. In my career, I've had at least 6, and there's probably more, but I've had 6 guys who turned down 12 to 21 years. It was a different number, but it was in that group, 12 to 21. And they were guilty. They were found guilty, and they all get life without parole. Some of those people could be out now. So I think that's the hard part, is that most cases, even some of the death cases, you do get an offer from the state. Like in a capital case, it's usually life without parole. If it's a non-capital case, they're generally willing to offer you second degree.
So you've had clients, or let me ask this question. Maybe you haven't said this. So you have had clients who have been offered a plea arrangement to something less than first degree, which is life without parole, turned that down, gone to trial, been convicted of first degree, and gotten life without parole.
Yes, too many of them. At least, again, I can recall like it's 6 for sure that got an offer between 12 and 21.
What drives a person to make that kind of roll of the dice?
I think it's a couple things. One, it's a great question. It's like, oftentimes I have to tell my clients, and I know this sounds, I try to keep a sense of humor, else I couldn't do this stuff anymore. Like, I say to my client, do you think when the legislature is thinking of changing the rules of evidence, do they ask Mr. McNeil to appear? They do not. Okay. So the rules are written by the state, which are generally conservative. You know that. Okay. They don't ask me, what do you think of that rule change, Mr. McNeil? Okay. I tell them, do you think that the juries like criminals in general? Okay. So they don't, want to accept the reality that they're in a bad position, and society is generally against them. So that's part of it. It's like, you know, so and then they often say, "I'll take 7 or 8 years." I had a guy in July, July 24. It was this imperfect self-defense case. Wasn't perfect self-defense. He turned down 21. He got life. And so that seems to be, I can't do 7 or 8. You know, and the famous story, and may not be true, but it's a great story, with some judge, the defendant said, "I can't do that much time," and the judge says, "Do the best you can."
He said, "I
Judge
can't do
said,
that much time." The judge said,
the
"What?"
client said, "I can't do that much time," and the judge said, "Do the best you can." Okay. So you know, I've been around long enough. I've heard enough good stories, and I certainly use them. So I think it's lack of education. Um, you know, kind of delusional thing is that, you know, we're the underdogs. Okay. You know, and you know, the systems, I'm not saying the system's unfair, but again, you know, they're not concerned about us. I had one family recently, and I got fired on this case. So, and I tell you, I was glad I got fired. Okay. Because the family was difficult to work with. And one of the family members sent me an email, and he said, "Mr. McNeil, how is it? Are they more concerned about the victim's family than ours?" That's shocking to me, but he said it. And so that's kind of, you know, where we are today. And again, I think a lot of that is society kind of thing. You know, like in the military leaders have to deal with what society is giving them. And, you know, we heard about the Greatest Generation in World War II and stuff like that. And there's a lot of truth to that, in the sense that the military gets what society is creating. And the same thing applies, you know, in the cases that I do or any other cases. So, so that's what I mean about families are difficult and clients are difficult. I understand you want the best for your daughter, okay, but the other person is dead. The mom said to me, "Can you get her out on bond? I wanted to have Christmas with her." Well, I think the decedent's family wanted her with them, and this was a case. It was on video in a restaurant, a live shooting. I mean, in other words, the jury's going to be able to see the shooting of the decedent. This is not a whodunit. Okay, so it's a lot of delusional, but it's based on education and upbringing and a lot of things. Probably doesn't make any same thing. You were a great waiter for a while there. You know, I bet I've heard people today that work in restaurants say, you know, some of the younger people are harder to train. You know, they're not criminals, obviously, but again, it's part of society.
I think you're spot on with what you just said. I think that the younger folks have more of a difficulty right now in being that sort of employee than a different older generation. I think, I don't know why, but I think that's true right now. Let me ask you this in sort of a fun way, Dick. If you and I were sitting down in a bar having a glass of wine, something like that, and you were just talking, we were just talking, telling stories, and I said, well, "Dick, tell me a good story from your time as representing the people that you do with murder. Tell me your best story or two. What would that be?"
I think I've given you a couple already, in the sense of things that I've heard, you know, from family members of the client. Um, I had a case once where a couple people were charged with killing somebody, and they arrested 2 defendants. I had one of them, um, uh, and he was talking, and you'll get a kick out of this. He was talking to the cops so much that they finally stopped the interview, which is unusual. Okay, he was just standing away like a little puppy dog. Okay, and then he says at the end of the conference with the cops, "Can I go home now? I told my daughter I'd be able to take her to the beach tomorrow." So I don't know if I have a general story, but I'm saying in almost every case, something is said that's, kind of funny, but also like, holy cow, that you're, again, use the word delusional or something. No, you can't go to the beach tomorrow with your daughter. Um, so I think almost every case has something like that. Or I've heard, and you've heard this before, even as a prosecutor, maybe through second sources. Well, I heard so and so got 5 years for this, and so it's the same old stories. Like, sure he did, okay. So, and it's kind of ironic that in North Carolina, these cases take a long time, like 2 to 4 years maybe to ever go to trial, and they're in jail for this period of time. And I think that makes it worse because they're talking to other people in jail. Okay. And they're swapping stories. And usually the stories are not accurate. The going around right now is a story of, hey, McNeill, they've offered me a plea. They've got to offer me 2 more pleas. Okay. No, they don't. Okay. I mean, so there's a lot of, crazy conspiracy, dumb commentary among the inmates that makes the job harder too. Like, because, prosecutor doesn't have to offer you anything. Generally they will, but they don't have to. So I can't think of any one general story other than almost everyone has some anecdote about, wow, I mean, that's hilarious. It should end up in my book. But no, you can't go to the beach tomorrow.
That's pretty good. Looking back, Dick, at your career, how would you assess it in terms of satisfaction? Are you glad that you have done what you've done, and do you feel good about that?
I would not change it at all. As you know, I'm 77. When I think of that number, I think, what am I doing here? But I still love the law, and I do love the law. I when I read the law or some cases, even if it's not a criminal case, I still enjoy that aspect of being a lawyer, reading the law. So I am still satisfied. I still think I'm capable of handling the pressure, and again, I think obviously experience helps you. Okay. When you pick a jury, there's certain things you'll learn, not in a law book, but just pick up from experience. So I would not change it. I think a lot of my fellow lawyers, and you probably hear this too, a lot of lawyers today, I'm not sure they're happy with being a lawyer.
Oh, I agree. I agree with that.
I'm not a corporate lawyer. I'm not on Suits or Suits LA. Okay. I'm not making a huge amount of money, but I've loved every minute of it. And I still love the profession. But I think a lot of lawyers today, it's become more of a business. And you know that too. Like you were working for the government, but it's a business. And I recognize you have to make it, earn a living and all that. But I don't find enough of them like, hey, I enjoy the challenge doing work. You're helping somebody. I mean, even if I get my guy to plead guilty, if I had able to convince those stubborn guys to take the plea that I got them offered, they would not spend the rest of their life in jail. I mean, so it's still satisfying.
Dick, thank you so much. This has been so enjoyable. It's so educational. I think people will really learn things that they had no idea about whatsoever from listening and watching you on this. Thanks again for doing this with me.
Well, I
And
appreciate being asked. I appreciate it, Jim.
absolutely. And I'm going to see you again in the not too distant future in
Couple of
Wilmington.
weeks.
Couple of
Yep.
weeks. Thanks.
Couple of weeks.
You
Looking forward to it.
take care and have a wonderful weekend.
Same to you,
Tell your
Jim.
wife you did great.
I'll tell her that. I don't know if she'll believe me, but I'll tell her.
Well, try it. Okay,
Okay. Thank
thanks.
you. Bye-bye.